Folks in Washita County like to say the land holds on to things, sounds, memories, even shadows. I used to laugh at that kind of talk, especially back in 2006 when I was still driving scrap for the co-op, hauling busted combines and rusted troughs from one farm to another. I knew those back roads like the lines on my hand, especially the one they call Coyote Ridge, a long dirt stretch that runs behind the old windmill fields. That evening, just before sundown, I was heading west with a half-load of twisted metal. My radio was fading in and out, and the wind had picked up that dusty smell you only get late summer when everything's dry to the bone. About halfway down the ridge, I heard something I couldn't place. Not on the road itself, but in the sorghum rows to my right. A heavy, deliberate movement, like someone pacing the truck, just out of view. I figured it was a cow that wandered off again. I even called out, "Go on, Git." But it didn't stop. The sound kept pace with me, same rhythm, just beyond the tree line. I slowed the truck, cut the engine, and rolled the window down. The silence after that was thick. Not the peaceful kind, either. The birds had gone quiet, even the bugs. And that's when I caught a glimpse. Something tall, darker than the crop rows, hunched low but still moving. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, stepped out, and stood beside the truck, listening. No crunch of hooves, no panting or huffing like a deer might make, just the rustle of stalks parting, slow and steady. I aimed the beam toward the sound, and that's when I saw eyes, low to the ground, wide apart, glowing faint like coals, just staring at me without blinking. I called out again, softer this time. The eyes disappeared, but I heard it rise, not like standing up from all fours, more like unfolding, and in one smooth motion, it stepped back into the field and was gone. But not before I caught a look at its legs. They bent the wrong way. Not like any animal I knew, not like anything that should have been upright. I backed into the truck, locked the doors, and sat there a moment, waiting to hear it again. Nothing came. But when I turned the key to start the engine, the lights flickered for a split second before roaring on like normal. Probably just the battery being temperamental, but it spooked me more than I'd like to admit. I reversed all the way down the road until I could find a place to turn around. Drove straight home. Didn't even unload the trailer that night. Told my boss I had a blowout, and he didn't ask questions. He's from around here. He knows when not to dig. The next morning, I came back in daylight, just to settle my nerves. I figured if it was a bear, I'd see some prints. If it was a prank, maybe I'd find tracks, boot prints, something. But what I found were impressions in the dirt, like bird feet, only huge, almost human length, and deep enough to have weight behind them. 3 toes, with claws that had dug in like it pivoted fast. I took photos on my flip phone and tried to show a buddy at the feed store. He just said, "Some things ain't for phones." That stuck with me. Still does. That week, I started hearing things again. Low noises in the trees behind my house. My dog, Toby, wouldn't go near the fence line after dark. He'd just sit on the porch, growling low, ears back. One night I left scraps out to see what might come around. Next morning they were gone, but the metal dish had been crushed flat, like someone stepped on it. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't want to be that guy who sees monsters in the fields. But every time I tried to forget it, something small would happen. Fence rattling, motion light flickering, even a strange smell like wet fur and soil. I started keeping a flashlight by the bed. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and just sit, listening. No reason, no noise, just a feeling that something was close enough to touch the windows if it wanted to. I didn't sleep much that fall. My wife said it was the stress from the job. Maybe she was right. I quit hauling a few months later, took a job at the hardware store instead. But I still have dreams of that road, Always the same part, always that same low rustling sound that's too smooth to be wind. I've seen mountain lions, feral hogs, even a black bear once near Medicine Park. This wasn't that. This was something that didn't belong, something that watched first, then chose to be seen. Maybe it was a cougar, sick and limping, making odd shapes in the dark. Maybe it was a man, though I can't imagine one moving like that. All I know is I trust my gut more now. And I don't drive Coyote Ridge after dusk. Not alone, not ever again. If you think that was unsettling, just wait till you hear what happened near Broken Bow. That one still keeps me up some nights. Oh, ChatGPT dis. About 12 years back, I was working as a night guard at a lumber yard just outside Broken Bow. It was honest work, mostly quiet, except for the occasional owl or raccoon knocking things around. We had a big spread of pine logs stacked like walls, with floodlights mounted high, but there were always blind spots. That August night was hot and still, with no moon, just the stars looking down like pinholes in a tarp. Around midnight, I left the little shack to stretch my legs, flashlight in hand. That's when I noticed one of the logs near the back had shifted slightly, enough to cast a new shadow that hadn't been there earlier. At first I thought maybe one of the younger workers had stacked it wrong during the day. But when I walked over, the air felt strange, like walking into a cooler. But there was no wind. I scanned around with the light and saw something move near the tree line behind the yard. A tall shape, standing perfectly still. It was too far to see clearly, but its outline was all wrong. Long arms, narrow torso, and a strange lean, like it didn't know how to balance right. I called out, "Hey, we're closed," more out of habit than anything. It didn't answer, just stood there. I took a few steps forward, light fixed on it. Whatever it was, it stepped behind a tree real slow, not startled or scared, just like it knew I was watching and didn't care. That's what got me. Not the shape, not the movement, but the calm. No animal I know just stands and lets itself be seen like that. I moved closer, maybe 20 yards from the trees now, and I could hear something, soft crunching, like dry pine needles under bare feet. Then nothing. I waited. The silence pressed in heavy, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Suddenly something hit one of the metal storage drums behind me, a sharp, metallic clang that echoed hard. I spun around, heart racing, but saw nothing. When I turned back to the trees, the shape was gone. Not a sound, not a footfall, just vanished. I walked backward all the way to the shack, locked the door, and didn't move until the sun came up. Didn't even finish my rounds. Come morning, I checked the log stacks and found a long scratch across one, deep, like from a claw or tool. But no drag marks, no prints, no sign of anything else. The boss said it was probably a bobcat, or even a black bear, but I've seen those before. They don't stand on two legs for that long, and they sure as hell don't move like that. A week later, one of the forklift guys quit after saying he saw a skinny man crouched on top of the lumber stacks at night. He didn't even ask for his last paycheck, just left. After that, they added new lights, cut down the brush. But the feeling stayed, that cold, watching feeling, especially on moonless nights. I never saw the figure again, but I'd sometimes catch movement on the cameras, blurry smudges, quick shadows. One night, the monitor went all static, just as I thought I saw something tall near the south fence. It came back on 5 seconds later. Nothing there. I never reported it. What would I even say? I just started bringing a thermos of coffee and a big flashlight, and I kept the shack locked unless I had to do a round. Still don't know if I was being cautious or just scared out of my wits. Eventually I left that job. Took something quieter, mowing lawns and fixing fences, But to this day, I still think about that shape. The calm in its posture, the intelligence almost. Sometimes I wonder if it was just a trick of the light, or me being tired and seeing things. But the scratch on that log, that was real. And I wasn't the only one who saw something strange in those trees. Whatever it was, it didn't want anything that night. But it wanted to be seen. Like a warning, maybe. Could have been a bear walking weird. Could have been a trespasser in a costume. I don't know. But if it was a person, they had a way of moving that wasn't right. Like bones bending in places they shouldn't. And I'll tell you now, I don't walk alone near Pine Woods after dark anymore. Anyway, the next story comes out of the Panhandle, near a dried-up riverbed folks call Whisper Hollow. And it's even stranger. Oh, ChatGPT Dees. Back in 2011, I was living alone near the edge of the Oklahoma Panhandle, not far from a dried creek bed locals call Whisper Hollow. I'd inherited my uncle's trailer and a few acres after he passed, mostly mesquite and dust, with a couple half-dead cottonwoods near the back. It was a quiet life. I did odd repair jobs in town, came home early, kept a small garden, and spent most evenings sitting on the porch with my old hound, Rufus. That hollow had a reputation, though. Folks said the wind sounded different there, like it carried voices. I never gave it much thought until one evening in early November, when something started circling the trailer after dark. I remember the sky had gone almost purple, and the air was unusually still. No wind at all, which is rare out there. Rufus started whining around 7. Not barking, not growling, just this low, steady whine that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I stepped outside with my flashlight, expecting maybe a coyote sniffing around. But Rufus wouldn't come off the porch, just stared at the tree line past the creek, eyes fixed and ears pinned back. I followed his gaze, but couldn't see anything. I listened hard. That's when I heard it. Dry leaves crunching slowly, like something heavy moving in a half-circle around us, just out of view. I called out. No answer, just the sound stopping, then starting again a few yards further along, always staying in the brush, never revealing itself. I kept the light moving, but nothing caught. Eventually the noise stopped altogether. I figured it had left, so I went back inside and locked up for the night. Around midnight, I woke to Rufus growling at the window. I rolled out of bed, heart pounding, and saw a tall shape standing just at the edge of the clearing. At first I thought it was a man, but the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, head slightly tilted, as if listening for something. I stood there frozen, watching it watch us. Then it moved, not toward the house, but along the tree line again, keeping just inside the shadows. Rufus barked once, sharp and loud, and the thing crouched low, fast, like an animal. Then it vanished into the creek bed. I stayed up the rest of the night, rifle across my lap, lights on in every room. Come morning, I walked out there, checking for prints. I found a few broken branches, some crushed grass, but no tracks. The ground was soft enough it should have left something, but it was too clean. Over the next few weeks, it came back 3 more times. Always the same pattern. Slow circling, never fully seen, but always felt. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse between trees, just a flash of movement, a flash of color not quite her animal. Once I swear I saw what looked like a long tail dragging behind it. Another night, something scraped against the side of the trailer hard enough to rattle the dishes. But when I ran outside, there was nothing. Not a thing. I started sleeping with the porch light on, but it didn't make a difference. Whatever it was, it didn't fear light. I tried setting up a trail cam near the edge of the clearing, pointed right where I saw it crouch that first night. But every time I checked it, the SD card was blank. Not even wind-blown leaves. I thought the thing was broken, until I set it up by the chicken coop instead and caught video of a raccoon the next night. That camera worked fine, just not when it was aimed at Whisper Hollow. That's when I stopped trying to make sense of it. Whatever was out there either knew how to stay hidden or didn't want to be seen by anything but me. In the spring, I put up a fence and started parking my truck right by the porch, blocking the view of the tree line. It helped a little. The feeling of being watched faded over time. Eventually, Rufus started sleeping through the night again. I never saw the figure again after that. But sometimes, when I'm out back during the late hours, I still feel that sensation crawling up my spine. Like something's nearby, staying low, waiting. I don't sit on the porch as much anymore. Maybe it was just a panther, or some hybrid coyote with a disease making it act strange. But I'll tell you, panthers don't walk circles around a house for hours without leaving tracks. And they sure don't disappear when you're staring straight at them. I never figured out what it was, and I'm not sure I want to. This next one happened near a storm shelter in Comanche County, and the way the ground moved that night, I still don't have words for it. It was the spring of 2014, early tornado season, and I was doing maintenance checks on old storm shelters for the county around Comanche. Folks don't think about those shelters until the sirens start wailing, but out here, they can mean the difference between making it or not. That day, I'd finished 3 inspections and had one left on a retired couple's land near Lake Ellsworth. They weren't home, but I had the key from the county office, so I went ahead. The shelter was one of those older concrete ones, half sunk into a ridge behind the barn, with a rusted-out door and weeds crawling up the sides. The sun was dipping low, casting that long golden light that makes everything look peaceful, even when it isn't. As I opened the hatch, I heard movement inside, soft shuffling like someone dragging their foot along the concrete. I called out, thinking maybe some kids had crawled in there, or worse, someone homeless. No answer. I waited a beat, then climbed down. The place smelled of mildew and rust. My flashlight beam swept across the interior, empty. Just a few old water bottles and a blanket in the corner, but the sound was still there, coming from the back wall, behind the shelves where the food rations were stored. That's when I noticed the wall wasn't flush. A crack had opened along the bottom, maybe from water damage or settling, and from inside that crack came the sound again, like breathing, slow and heavy. My light caught something inside, a shine, not like eyes, more like wet stone. I leaned in closer, and that's when something pushed back from the dark. Not a violent push, just a pressure, something pressing gently against the wall, testing it. I dropped the flashlight and scrambled up the ladder so fast I twisted my ankle. I slammed the hatch shut and leaned on it, heart hammering. I sat there for a while, listening. Nothing followed. No banging, no growling, just quiet. And the faint rustle of wind in the trees. I told myself it was probably an armadillo or raccoon stuck in the wall. But that pressure, it felt deliberate. Like something inside knew I was there. When I got back to the office, I filed the report as minor structural damage, recommend seal and fill. But I didn't tell them about the breathing, didn't mention the shimmer, didn't say a word about the way that cold air came from inside the concrete, like the earth itself was exhaling. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the same property. The couple said their dog refused to go near the shelter anymore. They found it barking one night at the hatch, growling low, tail between its legs. I went back out, this time during full daylight. Nothing had changed, except now the hatch was covered in dirt, like something had tried to bury it. There were no shovel marks, just mounds of dry soil piled against the door, like it had sifted up from underground. I asked if they'd done any digging. Neither had. The old man just said, Something ain't right down there, and left it at that. That summer we had a string of small quakes. Nothing major, but enough to rattle nerves and knock picture frames off walls. And after each one, that couple would call in again, saying the shelter smelled different, like wet dog and sulfur. The county eventually wrote it off as groundwater seepage. But I know what I felt pressing against that wall, and I know what I didn't see. Tracks, nests, scat. Nothing to suggest any animal had ever been down there. Still, something had. I don't take storm shelter jobs anymore. Stuck to road work and signage since then, but every so often I'll drive past that property. The barn's gone now, torn down after a lightning strike, but the shelter's still there, half buried, door chained shut. And I swear, every time I pass it, the grass around it looks flatter than the rest, like something underneath has been moving again, slowly, patiently. Maybe it was just air pressure shifting after all those years underground. Maybe a big old snake coiled up back there, looking for warmth. But snakes don't breathe like that. And they sure don't push back when you knock. If you thought that was strange, wait till you hear what happened to a mailman outside Ada. That one gave me chills for days. Back in 2018, I was delivering mail on a rural route southeast of Ada, about 30 miles of gravel roads, cattle gates, and the kind of mailboxes you gotta wiggle open with both hands. It was early October, just starting to cool off, and the leaves were falling like ash across the road. My name's Walt. I've been with the Postal Service since I got out of the Army, and let me tell you, there's not much I haven't seen out there. But that day was different. I had just finished Route 3 and was heading down Old Hickory Trail, where the road bends along a low ridge near an abandoned horse ranch. I had about 5 more deliveries to make when I noticed a strong, sour smell, like wet fur and copper. At first I thought maybe a deer had died nearby, but it got worse as I slowed near the old ranch gate. Rufus Henson used to own that land before he passed. No one's lived there in over a decade, but the gate's still standing, rusted and half open. I looked up and spotted movement just inside the tree line, a large animal crouched low, tan-colored, with its back to me. I figured it was a cougar. It's rare, but not unheard of around here. I rolled to a stop, pulled out my phone to get a picture. Right as I raised the camera, the thing stood up. Not fully, just enough to show that it wasn't a cougar. The back was too straight, the limbs too long, and the way it moved. It wasn't natural. It turned its head slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of one pale eye, and then it dropped back down and slipped into the underbrush without a sound. Not a single twig snapped. I sat there in my truck, stunned. I know what a cougar looks like. I know what a bear looks like. This was neither. I should have driven off, but something made me get out. Curiosity, or maybe just that old dumb instinct that makes you want to confirm what you saw. The air was still thick with that rotten metal smell. I stepped through the gate and walked about 20 yards into the trees. That's when I saw the prints. 5-toed, long, narrow, not quite human, not quite animal. The ground was soft from recent rain, and the impressions were deep. Whatever it was heavy. I snapped a picture and turned to head back, when I heard a low moaning sound from deeper in the brush. Not a growl, not a howl. It was like something trying to mimic a voice, and failing. That broke whatever nerve I had left. I bolted for the truck and didn't stop till I hit the main road. I radioed in, said there was an aggressive animal near the route, and skipped the rest of the deliveries. When I got home, I looked at the photo on my phone, but it had come out blurry, just a smudge in the dirt. I showed my buddy Mitch, who hunts boar in the area, and he said it looked like someone barefoot with a limp. But his voice cracked a bit when he said it. He didn't ask questions after that, just handed the phone back and said, "Don't go back there. Over the next few weeks, I avoided that section, took the long way around, but other carriers started talking about strange things. Mailboxes knocked clean off posts, animal carcasses left in ditches with no visible wounds, dogs refusing to get out of trucks. I never mentioned what I saw. Didn't want the station chief thinking I was losing it. But I started carrying a sidearm again, just in case. And every once in a while, I'd glance into those woods while driving by and swear I saw that shape again, always low to the ground, always still. Sometimes at night, I'd dream about that eye, not glowing or demonic or anything stupid like that, just pale, expressionless and unblinking, like it didn't see me as prey or as a threat, just something in the way. I don't care if it was an injured cougar or a feral person gone wrong out there. Whatever it was, it knew I was watching, and it wanted me to. Let's move on. The next tale takes us up into the Wichita Mountains, and the thing those hikers found in the rocks. Folks still talk about it in whispers. Oh, ChatGPT, DC. It was late summer of 2019, up in the Wichita Mountains, when I ran into something I still don't have a good name for. I'd taken a few days off work to clear my head after a rough patch. Just needed quiet, sky, and distance. I'd camped a dozen times up there before, always stayed near Crater Lake, where the trail gets rocky and the cell signal dies. That afternoon I hiked in with my old canvas pack, pitched my tent near the base of a boulder outcrop, and set up a fire ring. I was the only one out there. Not a soul for miles. At least that's what I thought. Just past dusk, the wind shifted. I was sitting by the fire, cooking a small trout I'd brought in foil, when I noticed how quiet everything had gotten. No crickets, no tree frogs, no rustle from the pines. I held my breath and listened. The silence had weight to it, like a pressure against the ears. Then I heard it, a stone clattering down the outcrop behind me. Not a slide, not a crumble, just a single, sharp fall. I stood up fast, scanned the ridge with my headlamp, and saw nothing. But I could feel it. Something was up there, watching. I called out, thinking maybe a lost hiker had wandered close. No response. So I climbed halfway up the slope, shining my light across the boulders. That's when I saw movement, a flash of pale limbs slipping between rocks, low to the ground. The shape was quick, and it moved like it didn't need to think about where to place its hands or feet. I froze. It was too big to be a bobcat, and too quiet to be a person stumbling around in the dark. I backed down slowly, not turning my back until I was near the fire again. I didn't sleep that night, just sat there, knife in hand, waiting for something to reappear. Around 3 a.m. I heard it again. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, circling the camp. I never saw it, just the feeling, the sounds, and once, the faintest flash of light reflecting off eyes near the tree line. I left at first light, packed in 10 minutes flat, didn't even finish my coffee. The trail out felt longer than usual. Every switchback made me feel exposed. I kept turning around, expecting to see something following, but there was nothing there. Not really. Just silence. Just that creeping feeling in the spine. Back in town, I tried to rationalize it. Mountain lion, maybe. But those don't climb rocks that way. And they don't have limbs that stretch wide like that. A few days later, I went back on a whim with a friend of mine, just to prove to myself it was nothing. We hiked to the same spot. The fire pit was still there, cold and scattered. But something was different. On one of the rocks above the camp, there were scratches, long curved ones in threes, like claws had raked across the stone itself. We took photos, but they didn't come out clear, and my buddy just said, "Let's not stay long. I've been back to the Wichitas since." but never to that spot. I stick to the trails now, keep things in the daylight, and I don't camp solo anymore. I still think about how it moved, like it had been living in those rocks its whole life, just waiting for someone to wander close, something that didn't mind being seen, as long as you never saw too much. It wasn't there to attack. It was there to remind me that not everything out in those hills has a name in the guidebooks. Maybe it was just a cougar with a bad leg, slinking around on the ridge. But if it was, it knew how to stay just far enough in the shadows to feel wrong. I don't know, I just know I wasn't alone that night. Anyway, let's head east now. Next one's out by the Arkansas border, and it starts with a strange noise coming from a dry well. This one happened in the fall of 2020, just outside a little place called Keota, near the Arkansas border. I was helping my cousin Greg clean up an old family property that had sat untouched since our great-uncle passed. Just a crumbling farmhouse, some rusted tools, and a dry stone well out back that hadn't drawn water in years. We were mostly clearing brush, knocking down wasp nests, that sort of thing. It was one of those gray, overcast days. No wind, sky so low it felt like it could press you into the ground. About mid-afternoon we heard the first noise, low, echoing, coming from the well. At first we thought it was wind funneling through the stone. Greg laughed and said, "Well's just talking again," like it was nothing. But the sound didn't stay constant. It would stop, then start again, almost like breathing. Deep, raspy, wet. I leaned over the rim and called down, expecting the echo of my own voice. Instead, something answered. Not words, just a single sound, long and guttural, almost like someone clearing their throat way down at the bottom. We both froze. Greg looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. We didn't say another word for a while. We dropped a flashlight on a rope down into the shaft. The beam hit about 20 feet down, then cut off into pitch black. The walls were lined with roots and slime, but nothing moved. Still, the sound continued, soft now, rhythmic, like something swaying. I wanted to believe it was water settling, or a trapped raccoon, or even an old pipe shifting. But it didn't sound like that. It sounded aware. Greg tossed a rock down to test the depth. We never heard it hit bottom, just the sound stopping, immediately, like whatever was making the noise had gone silent on purpose. We should have left then, but Greg's stubborn. He wanted to pull the stone cap back over the well, said it wasn't safe. As we started dragging it into place, the sound started again, louder this time. It was upset. We stopped moving the stone, and it quieted. We tested it again. Each time we touched the cap, the noise ramped up. Not fast, but deliberate, like a warning. That's when Greg said something that still sticks with me. It's not that it doesn't want out. It doesn't want us to close it in. We left the stone where it was and backed off. That night, Greg stayed in the old house while I camped in the truck out front. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of gravel shifting. Looked out the window and saw something move near the well. Tall, thin, almost insect-like. It didn't walk. It moved in jerks, like it didn't understand how limbs were supposed to work. I couldn't see its face, just the pale flash of limbs in the dark before it dropped into the well in one silent, fluid motion. I locked the truck doors and stayed up till daylight, heart beating so hard I thought it'd crack my ribs. Come morning, I told Greg what I saw. He didn't question me, just nodded and said he didn't sleep either. We packed up, locked the gate behind us, and haven't been back since. We talked about having the well filled, but neither of us made the call. Deep down, I think we were both afraid of what might happen if we tried to seal it up for good. That place doesn't want to be disturbed. Whatever's down there has roots older than we are. Could have been an animal, sick or injured, hiding in the shaft. Maybe a trick of acoustics and a tired mind. But I still hear that sound in dreams sometimes, low, slow, waiting, and I never lean over a well anymore. Not even the ones I know are dry. Let's keep moving. The next one takes us into cattle country near Woodward, where something kept leaving open gates, but only on nights when the moon was gone. This one's from the winter of 2022, out near Woodward. Flat plains, long fences, and more cattle than people for miles. My brother-in-law, Hank, runs a small ranch out there, and I'd gone up to help him fix some busted posts after a snowstorm. That week, temperatures dropped fast, and the wind didn't let up once. It cut through coats like knives. We'd been working daylight to dark, replacing wiring and tightening latches, but no matter what we did, every morning we'd find at least one gate wide open, always the same one, at the north pasture, and always on nights when the moon was gone. Now Hank's careful with his herd, real careful. He checks every gate twice and keeps good locks. But those gates weren't broken or tampered with. They were just open, swinging gently on hinges we'd tightened the day before. He thought it was kids, or maybe a neighbor messing with him. But the tracks in the snow didn't make sense. There'd be prints from the cattle, sure, but nothing human. No boots, no ATV tracks, not even a rabbit trail. Just long, narrow impressions near the fence line, three-toed, spaced far apart, and always leading away from the gate, never toward it. One night I told Hank I'd stay up and keep watch. He gave me a thermos of coffee, a folding chair, and a shotgun I didn't think I'd need. I parked the truck facing the north gate, killed the lights, and waited. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I saw movement, something coming up over the ridge. I figured it was a cow at first, but it moved too smooth, too upright. The moon was gone, like I said, but I could just make out a shape. It was tall, thin, and walked in a kind of crouch, like it didn't want to be seen. But what hit me hardest was that it never made a sound. No crunch of snow, no breath in the freezing air. It reached the gate and stood still for a full minute, just stood there. Then it leaned forward, placed one long arm over the latch and pulled it up, like it had done it 100 times. The gate swung open, and it slipped through without touching the fence. I lifted the shotgun and shouted, more out of reflex than courage. It turned its head toward me, slow and smooth, but I couldn't see a face, just a shape, like the blackness had thickened in one spot. Then it moved, fast, not toward me, not away, just gone, like it melted into the snow itself. I ran out with the light, heart pounding, but there was nothing. The prints were there, though, same as before. 3 long toes, deep in the snow, heading north until they disappeared near the tree line. We never did find out where they led. Hank put up motion lights and even cameras after that. But nothing ever showed up. Not on tape, not again in person. Just more open gates. Always during the new moon. We started locking it with chain and padlock after that. And that worked, for a while. But sometimes when I talk to Hank on the phone, he tells me he still finds the chain undone. Not broken, not cut, just hanging loose like someone knew the combination. He doesn't bother trying to explain it anymore. He just checks the herd, tightens the gate, and waits for daylight. Maybe it was just a clever thief or some kind of rogue animal. But animals don't unlatch gates, and they sure don't vanish into windless silence. I've hunted all my life. I know the sounds of the land. That night, the land went still for a reason. The next story's deeper into the woods near Talihina, where a man heard whispering from inside an old deer blind. What he found still gives me chills. This happened near Talihina in early November of 2021, right at the start of hunting season. My cousin Eli had invited me up for a few days at his cabin. He's got some leased timberland near the base of the Kiamichi Mountains. Thick woods, steep ridges, and not much else. Perfect deer country. We'd set up a couple blinds earlier that year, including one old wooden box blind that sat on a ridge overlooking a dried creek bed. It had been there for years, rickety, weather-beaten, but solid enough for one man and a thermos of coffee. I offered to take that spot opening morning, while Eli posted up on the lower slope. That night before, the woods were louder than usual. Coyotes yipping, owls calling back and forth, wind moving through the leaves like a slow wave. Around 3 a.m., I woke up in the cabin and swore I heard whispering, just outside. Too quiet to catch the words, but it was there. I chalked it up to a dream or the wind through the pine needles. By dawn, we were both out in the cold, trudging through frost-covered ground to our stands. I reached the blind around 6:30 and climbed in, pulled the old wooden hatch shut, and got settled. About an hour later, the whispering started again. Not outside, not this time. Inside. It was coming from beneath me, through the floorboards of the blind. I froze, ears straining, not breathing. It sounded like two people talking under their breath. One voice low and gravelly, the other quicker, lighter. I couldn't make out a word, but I could feel the rhythm, back and forth. Like a conversation. I pressed my ear to the floorboard, and the sound stopped immediately. Not faded, stopped, just gone, like it knew I was listening. I lifted my boots off the floor and sat perfectly still for what felt like an hour. No birds, no wind, just that tight, crushing silence. Then suddenly the blind creaked, not from the wind, but from something shifting weight against the back wall. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing in the small space with me. I opened the hatch and peeked out. Nothing but trees and fog rising in thin ribbons from the cold earth. I nearly climbed out right then and there, but some part of me wanted to hold my ground. Maybe it was pride, maybe stupidity. A little after 9, I finally stepped out to stretch and check for tracks along the creek bed. That's when I saw them. Footprints leading to the blind, but not away from it. Barefoot. Long, wide-set toes, no treads, no boot marks. Just one set, heading straight to where I'd been sitting for 3 hours. I called out for Eli over the radio, but only got static. It didn't work again until I was halfway back to the cabin. When I told him what I saw, he didn't laugh. Didn't say a word for a good 10 seconds. Then he told me he'd heard something in the woods the night before. 2. Like a child humming far off in the trees. We went back later that day with better radios and flashlights. Looked under the blind, expecting maybe a hollow or some kind of burrow. Nothing. Just dry dirt and dead leaves. But the smell under there was strange, like wet feathers and copper. Eli just muttered, "We're not hunting that ridge again." And we didn't. We moved both blinds down near the lake, and neither of us has set foot back on that slope. It could have been a prank, or some hiker gone feral, though I'd be damned to see anyone walk barefoot through that bramble without leaving blood. Maybe it was an owl call distorted by the wood, or maybe the land remembers more than we do. The next one's out of the Red Hills near Duncan, where an old windmill turned when there was no wind, and something watched from the wheat. This was the summer of 2017, out in the Red Hills near Duncan. I was staying with my Uncle Reuben for a few weeks, helping him restore an old windmill that had been on the family property since the Dust Bowl days. He's the kind of man who won't hire help if a nephew's got 2 working hands. So there I was, sanding rust, tightening bolts, sweating through my shirt under that hot Oklahoma sun. The windmill stood in the middle of an overgrown wheat patch, a good 40 yards from the main house. Tall, crooked, and silent. It hadn't spun in decades. That's why it caught our attention the first time it moved. It was just after 9 p.m., sky full of stars and not a breeze in sight. Uncle Reuben and I were on the porch drinking cold beer, feet kicked up on the rail when we heard the creak. A long, slow, turning metal groan. We both turned our heads at the same time. The windmill was moving, slowly at first, then with more purpose. Not fast, but steady. The blades caught moonlight and turned with a kind of weight, like it was pulling something up from the earth. I glanced at the trees. Not a leaf moved. That part stuck with me. We went down to check it out with flashlights, thinking maybe the gear inside had loosened and the weight was making it shift. But when we got close, the air changed. It was warmer, like walking into someone's breath. The wheat around the windmill was parted in a wide circle, flat like something had been lying there. Not crushed randomly, patterned. And in the dirt beneath, there were marks, long, narrow streaks like fingers dragging in circles. Uncle Reuben stared at them for a long time, and finally said, "Let's not mess with it tonight." Next morning, I went down early by myself, wanting a closer look before the sun got too high. The blades were still, everything silent again. I walked around the base and noticed the pattern in the wheat had shifted. Same shape, but fresh, like whatever had laid there had come back during the night. I crouched to take a photo and heard movement in the field, a soft rustling, not far off. I stood, scanning the stalks. That's when I saw it, a pale face just above the wheat, staring straight at me. No detail, just round and still. I blinked, and it was gone. Ducking? Vanishing? I don't know. But the wheat swayed for a good 5 seconds afterward. I ran back to the house, didn't say a word at first. Just sat on the porch, trying to calm down. Reuben came out eventually and looked at me. "You saw it too, huh?" That's all he said. Turns out he'd been seeing shapes around that windmill for years. Only at night. Only when the air was dead still. He once tried to clear the wheat back, thinking it was attracting coyotes. But the next day, it had grown back up, fuller than before. The land wanted it there. We stopped working on the windmill after that. Let it rust. Let it stand. Every now and then I'll get a text from him late at night. It turned again. Nothing else. Just that. The strange thing is, the blades never move on windy days. Only the ones when the stars are bright, and the earth holds its breath. Maybe it's old mechanics, weight shifts, heat expanding the metal, though that's the easy answer. But I've never forgotten that face. Not angry, not threatening, just waiting, watching. Like it belonged there and I didn't. Anyway, next up is a story from the salt flats near Jet, where something walked beside a truck for miles, but never showed up in the mirrors.